Welcome to Dare, the show for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders who dare to shape the future. Your hosts today are Ned Hayes and Cecilia Mariani. Dare is brought to you by Darwaf, the superpower tech team that can make your vision a reality. The Dare Show is happy to welcome Skip Newberry.
So welcome to the show, Skip. TAO
Thank you.
is doing some really important work in Oregon and across the Pacific Northwest. Can you describe your mission there?
Sure. Yeah. So our mission is really about helping the tech industry here grow and thrive. And that includes both providing opportunities for folks to get access to tech careers. So we try to make sure that our tech community and innovation ecosystem is as inclusive as possible. So we do a lot with ed and workforce partners to design curricula, bring in new programs, help align with employer needs in terms of talent development. And then we also do a bit of professional development for existing employees at the member companies we work with. We do a fair amount of access to capital work, connecting startups and growth stage companies to seed stage investors, VCs, private equity, and even corporate potential investors as well. And then we also do a fair amount of government relations and regulatory work. And there our focus is on improving regulatory and business environment for companies to start and grow. So those are the areas where we do quite a bit of our work. We do some other stuff as well. And, we're kind of a privately funded economic development entity on the one hand and a regional trade association on the other. So there's obviously a lot of opportunities that we take on a daily basis to help our member companies connect to resources to help them thrive businesses.
Right. So your job is to help businesses to thrive. And you mentioned connecting entrepreneurs to capital. How does that work?
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of times when we meet with an early stage startup, they usually have one of four different needs, right? It's access to capital, access to or investors, access to talent, which could include mentors or advisors, access to early customers. And then the fourth is usually, hey, we need some visibility. We need people to know that we're legitimate, we're a going concern, we're out there, and this is what we're doing, some great stuff. And so we can usually help on all four. As it relates to access to capital, we'll typically assess what's the philosophy of the company. Are they looking at hyper growth potentially? Are they looking at something that's a little bit more kind of modest in terms of their growth trajectory? And then we'll kind of align based on local out-of-state resources that we might have connections to help match them up with investors that we think we could. And we let them, of course, make their final decision and who is ultimately the right fit. So we don't provide capital ourselves. TAO, we don't manage a fund. And in that way, our client is the entrepreneur. And so we try to do right by the entrepreneur and helping them get connected to resources like capital.
Yeah, so every new idea is an innovation. The challenge is getting your idea to market, right? So how does TAO help entrepreneur with that problem of getting something from an idea to a product to actually making money?
Yeah, so one of the things we help with is, especially if a startup is selling into IT organizations at larger or mid-sized companies, we also work with a lot of CIOs and chief innovation officers and key decision makers at more established businesses. And partly why they're involved in TAO is to get access to interesting new companies in the area that help them solve some of their business and technology needs. And so we do some matchmaking there, helping to provide startups with visibility and connections to potentially reference customers. And what's great is that with everyone being local, we have a lot of CIOs and IT and other business leaders who are more than happy to provide some candid feedback, maybe a little more than they would in an otherwise arm's length transaction where someone's reaching out and just trying to sell something. Because they're local, they might say, oh, by the way, here are some things you might want to tweak in your sales pitch. Or here are some things that really resonate with someone who's a decision maker in my position at similar types of companies around the US. Here are some of the things we consider. So that type of feedback is invaluable because, now more than ever in this funding environment, startups are being asked to say, hey, show that that there's traction in the market, that there's interest in your product or service. So being able to have that kind of access to folks that you're going to be selling to or trying to sell to currently to provide that type of candid feedback is really useful.
Right. And you've helped a lot of companies through this kind of product cycle process, right? So could you share with us one or two success stories of companies that have come to you for assistance and then have been able to kind of break through with your help or with the kind of introductions you've provided?
Certainly. Yeah, just yesterday, Ned, you and I were at an event where we had one of the executives from a company that formerly was known as RFPIO and now is rebranded as Responsive. And when they were just getting going, there were three co-founders, and it was literally a meeting in a coffee shop where they were like, "Here's our idea. Here's what we're we're looking to do, and leave our day jobs." And so what we helped with were a couple of things in tandem. One was we ended up writing an article for the Portland Business Journal on the company and what they were launching and the problem they were trying to solve. And we mentioned, of course, the fact that they were looking to raise money. So while doing that, I then made some introductions to some of our member companies that were farther along and were responding to a lot of RFPs. And many of them had complained that it was kind of a tortuous process, highly inefficient. And talking to the founder our PIO, now Responsive, it was one of those things where it was like, wait, how does this product not exist? You hear him describe it and it's like, of course there's a market need for that.
Right.
And so we were definitely helpful in introducing Responsive to some of their customers, which was cool. But what really helped too was also the Business Journal article, because it kind of validated the company. So if someone's getting an email from you, they're like, "Oh yeah, I think I remember reading in the Business Journal last week, there is this company that's doing that. That's great." And so it's kind of that 1-2 punch that I think really helps kind of keep things top of mind for some of these folks when they get an email from us saying, "Hey, take a look at this startup. I think it might be something that'll help your company."
Yeah, sometimes unlikely ideas succeed too. So, but
Yes.
what is the most surprising success story you've seen?
The surprising success story. So I would say, there's a lot of times investors will say, when you're investing in an idea stage company, it's really about, investing in person or the team. It's like, do you trust that this person is going to be able to deliver on sort of the promise, if you will? And I would say that I don't want to necessarily call specific companies, because what I'm about to say is that I'm constantly surprised, where I think, okay, this idea just isn't going to make it, and then it turns out the person is ultimately successful, and it could be the idea changes, but I've also been surprised at the number of times that the idea actually has legs, right? And I was blatantly wrong. And so, like, I've seen a lot of startup ideas over 10 plus years. And granted, I'm not purporting to be as talented as the VCs and private equity folks who are out there evaluating companies, but they have to get a lot of bets wrong as well.
Right.
And so, just one of those things that I think is important to keep in mind. It's both as someone who potentially might be investing, that a lot of startup ideas maybe change dramatically before they get to market, and others are just forced into the market by sheer force of will.
Right. Well,
and eventually they get traction.
Right. Well, even if you won't name one, I was really surprised to see Rumple take off with Wiley Robinson. Mm-hmm. I thought that was such an obvious idea that, of course, no one would buy it. But right. I was totally wrong. It's been such a huge success in Oregon and such a huge success for the company. And I really think it's fantastic that they took off.
So all right, you've challenged me, you've pushed me. The one that I have to say was the craziest was a company that actually ended up getting covered in Wired, and Wired thought it was so crazy, but it worked. And so this guy had this idea where he was going to essentially sell $100,000 razors with sapphire crystal blades, and they would never need to be sharpened. And so the Wired point something that I was thinking of, which is like, okay, if this is kind of one of those show off kind of luxury items, who shows off a razor? I get like a luxury watch, a luxury car, a house. You can kind of show it off, a piece of art, right? But not a razor. So it has zero kind of halo effect around the show off. And yet he sold all 10. His goal is to sell 10 of
Yeah.
them and make $1 million. He did.
Wow.
So there's
That's
a market
amazing.
for everything.
Right. All you have to do is find the right customer, right?
Yep.
Sounds simple, not so simple. So
Not too-
besides connection to capital and working with entrepreneurs, you also do a lot of work with lawmakers and with legislative staff to get legislation out there that can create a better business environment. Just an example, a year or so ago, you recruited me to be part of the organized retail task force here to get legislation out there to prevent retail crime. And that's actually, moved through a task force process. We worked with Amazon and Walmart and Target and a number of other companies. And that legislation is making a difference for law enforcement and for retailers. So that's just my example of TAO really making a difference to connect the dots. I'm curious if you could share some other kinds of partnerships or work that you're doing on legislation, either locally or nationally.
Certainly. Obviously, the big topic right now as we head into next year and the years beyond is going to be artificial intelligence. But in the recent year or two, we've been focused on two things. Data privacy is one, and another is cybersecurity. And so with data privacy, we've been working with the Attorney General and her team for about 4 years. And the AG convened a task force that we've been on for that time, which led to the passage of Oregon's first comprehensive consumer data privacy bill this last legislative session. And it was an interesting task force in that we had a mixed history as well as labor unions and activists and other groups. And, it was a lot of hashing out back and forth to find some common ground and a set of essentially principles and frameworks and definitions that folks could at least tolerate. No one was necessarily completely thrilled with the final product, and that to me is a mark of a good piece of legislation. And then on the cybersecurity side of things, for the last 8 years, we've been working to essentially establish a cyber center of excellence in Oregon at the state, which importantly would open up the state to a lot of federal funding opportunities, having a formal center of excellence established, and include public, private, and academic and education sector partners. And there's a lot of best practices sharing. There's also an opportunity with funding to go to certain programs that already exist at the higher ed level. That one example is a security operations center at Oregon State University that allows students to work with cyber professionals to provision cybersecurity resources to under-resourced school districts and government agencies. And so there's like a win, three different ones with the structure of that. And so we're pretty pleased that we've had some success that kind of culminated this last legislative session on two very important topics, cybersecurity and data privacy. And now we're gearing up for AI.
So that is awesome. And what's next? So what important legislation about AI is on your radar this coming year?
Yeah, I think much like data privacy, it's a bit of government wanting to both understand the technology a bit more. And in the case of data privacy, it was about understanding the business models that have led to some concerns around data privacy. And here, I think the AI technology has been evolving in the last few years. A lot of the state and federal governments are really trying to move quickly to not get caught flat-footed. And it's a challenge because it's always a matter of a slow legislative process and policymaking process and really fast-moving technology. And oftentimes the legal system as well is incredibly slow-moving. Case law, as you're starting to see different application technology and problems that arise, and cases take forever to get courts and then establish precedent. It's the same issue over decades with intellectual property. So it's going to be interesting just how fast AI is evolving and how many unknowns there are. So it's going to be a lot whack-a-mole in some cases. And we have to try and get ahead of things from the public sector standpoint, where it's how do you regulate with data privacy the uses rather than the technology is one approach philosophically that I think makes some sense and allows for a relatively slow process from a regulatory or policy standpoint. So again, with AI, it's about the safeguards. It's about establishing certain fundamental parameters and then allowing for some innovation. And it's a tricky balance. So it's going to be an interesting process for sure.
Yeah, so we've talked kind of high level about AI just now, But how is AI, in your opinion, going to change the face of business? I mean, 10 years from now, where is AI in business? What is AI in business going to look like?
Yeah, the two things that we're seeing a ton of right now are essentially adoption as it relates to the customer service side of things, and more a la carte and self-help opportunities to automate some of that process. I do think as well that there's companies that are experimenting with more of an augmented AI or augmented intelligence with people still involved in that process, but it's automated far more than the status quo. And so I think that's something that companies are going to have to strike a balance on, is what is the expectation of the consumer as it relates to AI, and when do humans intervene, and what role do humans play in training the AI as well. And out of the larger companies we've been working with over the last, let's say, 9 months or so, most of them in the next 3 to 5 years are going to be doing a lot of internal deployment of AI technologies to get greater efficiencies and performance optimization across a lot of their business processes. And I think in one respect, the thinking there is that employees are far more forgiving customers. If you deploy a new technology and it maybe doesn't work quite as well, there's fewer repercussions, and employees can kind of work through it, as opposed to a customer, which might say that one experience was awful and going to a competitor. So I think that for companies that are building AI right now on the technology side of things, there's going to be huge opportunities as it relates to business process automation. And then we'll see what comes out of some of these organizations that are doing stuff that's incredibly disruptive, and sort of what gets challenged more fundamentally.
Yeah. And what are the risks or downsides of businesses using AI? Do you see any problems coming in the future?
Oh yeah, I mean there's
good question.
Issues.
Yeah, just a few.
Just a few. I mean, one of the things is it's a powerful tool, and if used for good, that's great. But it can also be used for nefarious purposes. And so you think about the proliferation of cybersecurity risk and state-based actors that have incredible resources to really disrupt entire systems and infrastructure. You think about AI on top of that, it's worrisome. I also worry about things like mis and disinformation.
Mm-hmm.
And we're coming up on an election here that's pretty, let's see, fraught, I guess, or divisive. And so there's a lot of incentives for hostile nation states to with, the election process to kind of benefit their own interests. And so I worry about what AI could do for disruptions to democracy as well, on that front, just because it's an accelerant for a practice that's already out, which is getting mis and disinformation. And I also worry about some of the large language models. Are we essentially going to be raising to a situation where there's just a lot of really crummy content out on the web that just kind of is feeding off of itself over 5 or 10 years, and end up with this garbage in terms of created output from the AI? And so there's a number of kind of more, and then of course there's super dystopian things too, with AI controlling robots and more science fiction Terminator style outcomes that are worrisome.
Right. Well, you sound really informed on these topics, and I'm curious if part of the work of TAO is also informing your partner companies and educating people on the pros and cons of AI.
Definitely. I mean, I think a lot of times at the staff level, we kind of glean enough from our subject matter experts within our network to be somewhat dangerous, or at least have a superficial understanding of some of this stuff. But really our bread and butter is some of the folks who have deep subject matter expertise and are living day in and day out within the member companies we work with, to policymakers, connecting them to academic, to education providers, so that they can start thinking about how might this be applied in our scenario and in our situation. And frankly, having AI experts share, hey, here's what keeps me up at night. Here are some things I worry about. And yes, we can do this. Should we?
Right.
I think it's a big question around AI right now.
Yeah, lots of open questions. So just to put a plug in here, I know companies in Oregon can join the Technology Association of Oregon. But why would they? What benefits do they get? And I'll just tack on to that. I know yesterday you announced a partnership between TechWorks and TAO. Does that add to the kind of basket of benefits that people get from TAO?
It does, and it will. Yes. So one thing we've been looking at is, adding more kind of quantifiable benefits where our company is able to access some discounted services or pooled services at a more competitive rate as it relates to their operation. It could be 401k, it could be things around health insurance. And these are all things that are incredibly important for especially early growth stage companies because they're trying to compete for talent and they often don't have the same resources to compete with the largest companies. So if they can get the same benefits offerings at the same price as the large players, it helps to kind of even the playing field a little bit there around talent retention and recruitment. I think it'll be really important for us. I think another selling point, obviously, is what we talked about earlier. It's companies being able to rely on us, understand business and their needs, and be able to connect them to resources that are important to helping their companies to grow and thrive. And in some cases on the business environment side, we're trying to correct for things that might be an impediment or a barrier to their business. And on the workforce side, it's optimizing the system to benefit the companies in their development efforts. And then finally, we've also announced we're going to be launching a TAO University in 2024, which is going to be on rising managers and leaders within tech companies across different functions. And it'll have a cohort model that allows people to kind of learn from one another and also from subject matter experts and trained instructors, both general leadership training and skills, as well as more technical, function specific. And we'll also be able to layer in over time some TAO specific magic, as it were, in terms of helping those get connections and relationships with some of the leading nonprofit folks and thought leaders, public sector, how to serve on boards and have influence within the community. So we're pretty excited about it and what it could lead to. And so we've got a lot of cool stuff coming up in 24.
Fantastic.
Wow, great benefits. Yeah, fantastic.
Yes.
What about the global perspective? How does your work at TAO impact how the USA and other countries cooperate? Do you help to facilitate? It's longer, sorry. Do you help to facilitate a better working environment for companies to work together in the United States as well?
Yeah, definitely. We serve as like a connection of trade organizations from different countries that are looking to foster greater relations, especially around innovation or tech companies, one nation state to the next. And we regularly host delegations who are interested in doing business here and vice versa. We've all taken Oregon companies abroad. We also work closely with Business Oregon and some of our economic development partners on recruitment effort, and then also helping provide access to resources, subsidies for companies to go to trade shows and that kind of stuff. And what's interesting too is just since the last 3 years, as companies have become more decentralized and distributed, and it's flattened kind of the hiring landscape. We have a lot of companies that are far more global earlier on in their development than they were in the past because they can hire talent wherever it's located. And that's true of the United States. It's also true of companies that are based in Oregon that now have global offices.
Right.
And so I think that's exciting. It's also a little scary as a parent where I'm telling my kids, I'm like, you have to do well in school because not only are you competing with other kids around the US, but you're competing with everyone in the world because the world is pretty flat when it comes to competition for jobs these days. So
right, the world is getting smaller every day. I mean, I work with people around the world and I'm on calls all day long with people around the world. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like your work is also encompassing the globe.
Yes.
Yeah,
definitely.
Final important question. Our podcast is about people who dare to dream. So what do you dare to dream, Skip? What future do you dare to imagine you are creating at TAO?
So one thing that has really animated me throughout my career has been the ability to help folks who, maybe didn't necessarily have all the resources handed to them when they started. And just by way of example, my mom and my grandfather came over to the U.S. as refugees after World War II from the Baltics, and they had nothing. And seeing what they were able to achieve through a network, a diaspora, if you will, of expats who had also relocated, was phenomenal. And then my grandfather and mom ended up paying it back by helping other people relocate and come in and get access to opportunities and support them along the way. And I wanted to do something like that and, recognize or honor that tradition and that part of the family. And when I saw an opportunity to learn about how to help entrepreneurs at scale, that was an opportunity that was presented with TAO. And so, that to me was fantastic and worthwhile. And I have to say, over the last 10 plus years, I've been able to work with some incredible people doing amazing things. And if I can, through the team TAO, help them be more successful and have a little part in that overall story, that to me is incredibly rewarding work. And what's cool about the folks we focus on in technology is that technology can have a huge impact, and when applied in a positive way. And so one thing that for me is really important is, as technology is seen as a system or a tool that can be used to impact a lot of folks, it can be a force for good. And to me, that gets me excited every day, showing up for work at TAO and helping people to understand how they can kind of make that dream possible.
Great. Thank you so much for this inspiring interview, Skip. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Skip.
This was fun.
Thanks to our guests today for their great insights on DARE, the podcast for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders. If you'd like your story to be featured on DARE, just contact us at info@darwaft.com. DARE is brought to you by Darwaft, the tech team that can make your vision a reality.